Hey, it's Rob. Let me ask you something quickly. Have you been feeling a little bit frustrated with your music lately? You know that there's something about it that's not quite right. Whenever you compare it to your favorite commercial songs, you can hear that, but you're not exactly sure what it may be. Well, if this is the case, I want to show you how to go from demo to pro. Now, I know the rhyme's a little bit cheesy, but forget about that. We're going to be looking at the 10 distinctions that separate the amateurish sounding demos from the professional sounding commercial tracks. So by the end of this, I want you to have a clear plan. I want you to know exactly what it is you need to do and what it is you need to work on to get your music to the next level and sounding the way that you really want it to sound. Great. Now, your tracks may not sound like demos, they may sound pretty good already, but maybe you're just missing one or two key things that will really make the difference. I've listened to literally hundreds and hundreds of tracks from musicians all over the world. And the amazing thing is that it doesn't matter what style it may be, it doesn't matter what gear they're using, and it doesn't matter where they're from. It could be London, Amsterdam, Sydney, Beijing, or New York. The mistakes are the same because everyone's unaware of the same thing. So what this means for you and your music is that if you know what these things are that are holding your music back, you can fix them and at least start to improve them. In other words, this is the next step to taking your music to the next level. So I've put this into a short little book for you. You can download it just below this video over here. There's no charge, it's totally free. And there's also a checklist at the end so that you can rate your own tracks and these things that we're going to look at and see how you do. Of course, I encourage you to keep watching this video because I'm going to be showing you these things practically, but that'll be a great resource to refer back to. Alright, so I really hope this helps you discover what it is that you need to do to get your tracks to the next level. And with that said, let's get to it. Now, I didn't want to just tell you what these 10 mistakes are. I wanted to show you so that you could really experience them for yourself and hear what an impact they make. So when a good friend of mine recently asked me to listen to some of her recordings and give her some constructive criticism, I decided to help her reproduce one of her tracks and avoid all these mistakes so that I could use it over here as an example to help you to improve your tracks. So I'll just play a couple of seconds, a quick before and after, so that you can hear what a difference it made. It makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Now, to be clear, this is not about her or her song or the style, any of that stuff. This is about your music. If it's not sounding the way you want it to yet, you're making at least one or a couple of the same mistakes that she is. Probably not as many, but it only takes one or two to put your song in that dreaded demo category. So what makes that original version sound kind of like an amateur demo? Well, the second version just sounds like a professional production. Well, we'll get to that in a moment, but first I want to give you a little challenge. I'm going to play about 30 seconds of that original version again, and I want you to count how many mistakes you can hear, and then we'll go through them together. Alright, so there's quite a few mistakes in there. How many did you count? Well, let's see how you did. We're going to start out by looking at the top 5 musical mistakes, because we've got to get the music right first, otherwise it doesn't matter what we do. And then in part 2, we'll have a look at the top 5 technical mistakes. So we're going to count them down from the least to the most common musical mistakes made. Let's start with number 5. In 5th place, the 5th most common mistake that I come across has to do with tuning. Demos often have instrumental vocals with tuning issues. Pro tracks sound on key throughout the song. You could record the most incredible performance of all time, but if the instrument was out of tune, you often can't use it unless you can fix it in some way. Music is about choosing notes and chords that sound harmonious together, so they complement each other. They essentially vibrate in harmony. But when an instrument or vocal is slightly sharp or slightly flat, the vibrations of that sound no longer match up with the other sounds in the song, so it sounds a little bit off, it sounds dissonant. Alright, so let's take a look at the track. Did you spot any tuning issues in the song? Well, there were at least two that stood out to me. The one was a bass line, and the other is with the vocals. If we play this bass line by itself, it actually sounds okay. But take a listen to what it sounds like if we play it with the piano over here. Definitely something a little bit off about that. And since the rest of the song sounds fine with the piano, I realized that it must be the bass line, which turned out to be a little bit flat. So what I did was just tune it up slightly, just using a regular pitch shift, and this is what it sounds like now. A lot better. The other issue is the vocals, which are really only out of tune in a couple of places, and she has used some auto-tune, which is a great way to fix tuning issues, but she's made a mistake. She hasn't limited it to the key of the song. So she's used pitch correction, but in some cases, it's actually pulling the notes further out of tune. You can hear it in this example over here. I'm going to put the pitch correction on the fastest setting that it has so that you can really hear what it's doing to the sound. So that we never, if I play it with the other vocal part, you'll really hear it. Right, so it doesn't sound very good. If we limit it to the key, right, so that's better. So now it's actually keeping it within the limits over here. It's only tuning it to notes that are in the key of the song. So some key lessons. Record enough takes so that you can comp together the best parts that are in tune. So if you find some part that's out of tune, you can just choose a different take. It's always better to get a good take than to try and fix a bad take. Secondly, if you're recording live instruments, always make sure that you check the instrument's tuning before each take. And thirdly, if you have tuning issues and you don't have another take, make sure that you fix them using something like pitch shifting or auto-tune. Just make sure that you set it to the key of the song, or it may actually pull certain notes even more out of tune. What I recommend doing is starting out by putting the auto-tune on the fastest setting that it has, so it sounds like that way overused, cheesy, pop auto-tune sound, but just to make sure that it's tuning it correctly and it's pulling the notes to the right places. And once you have that, then you can back it off so it doesn't sound so noticeable. The fourth most common issue that I come across, and a guaranteed way to get that wonderful amateur demo sound, is if it contains wrong notes or chords. Demos allow wrong notes or chords to slip through, while pro tracks, they just don't have mistakes in them. I remember once seeing a video by some top producer, I can't remember who it was, but he was saying that he sometimes finds that the tracks that he produces are just too perfect, so he always tries to make sure that there's at least one mistake somewhere in there. Now, that's what I call a high quality problem to have. For the rest of us in the real world, we've got more than enough problems to worry about, and we don't have to worry about our tracks sounding too perfect. We're just trying to get them as close to perfect as possible. Now, I don't think anyone intentionally leaves mistakes in, but what can often happen is a wrong note or chord gets buried somewhere in a big mix and then forgotten about. The thing is, you don't often hear it explicitly, but it makes the whole song sound a bit off at that point. So, did you hear any mistakes in this track over here? Well, I can tell you that there's at least one or two wrong bass notes in there. and the piano has a couple of issues. Take a listen to the piano over here. You catch that? I'm going to solo the piano for this part. That's either a very creative chord or more likely just a mistake. So what can we do about this? Well, if it's a live instrument, you can often fix a wrong note or chord by simply copying the same part from another section of the song. As long as it's the same type of notes or chords and it has a similar intensity, you can get away with it. And of course, this saves you having to re-record. In this case though, it's MIDI, so it's so easy to fix. All we have to do is go in there, find the wrong notes, and just move them to where they should be. So this is what it sounds like in this little section here. All right, so I'm going to guess that it's these notes over here. And you can see over here that she's actually corrected it just a little bit later. So I'm assuming both of these are going to have to move to that position. And let's take a listen to it now. And much better. Literally as simple as that. The bottom line is, with the wonders of the modern recording program that we have right in front of us, we can fix most problems, and so there's really no reason why anyone should have any type of wrong note or chord in their tracks. Make sure to always record a couple of different takes so that if you do come across a problem somewhere in the mix that you didn't notice while tracking, you can always just cut out that little section and swap it out with a piece from a good take. In third place, for the most common demo problems, we have balance. Demos sound out of balance and out of focus, making you strain to hear key elements clearly. While pro tracks sound well balanced and focus your attention on the most important parts of the song. Balance is really the very essence of mixing. We want all the elements that make up a song to be in the right proportions so that when someone listens to it, it allows them to best experience that song. It doesn't matter how great a certain part is if no one can hear it in the final track. Balance is not about making everything the same level. It's about emphasizing the main elements and making sure that the rest of the instruments support those main elements. So for example, if the vocals are the main focal point, they should be loud and clear, and then the rest of the mix should support that. So when you listen to the song, did you notice any balance issues? Did something sound too loud, something sound too soft? Tell you what, let me play you the new version first so that you can hear what it sounds like with a well-balanced mix, and then I'll play you the original version and you tell me what you think might be out of balance. So this is the new version first.
We could go back there, live in there, find love outside, okay. Maybe I can find someone new, but I want only you.
And this is the original version.
We could go back there, living there, find love outside, okay. Maybe I can find someone new, but I want only you.
So what did you notice? Well, I think we can pretty objectively say that the drums sound too loud and the vocals sound too soft. I mean, there's a part of the vocals here where they kind of just trail off and you can't even hear that well what she's singing.
But honey, I only you.
The end of that line over there kind of just trails off and you can't actually even hear the words. And the drums, they just sound too loud. They sound too dominant, like they're taking over, which may work for something like a hip-hop track or something, but for this track over here, it just sounds too much. So a couple of tips and key lessons. You want to make sure that the main elements are the main elements. If that's the lead vocal, then that should be loud and clear. If it's a guitar solo, that should stand out. So this could change depending on the part of the song, and so this is why we need to adapt depending on what is playing at the time. How do we do this? Well, one way is to use automation. It's very unlikely that something like a vocal is going to be the perfect level throughout a song. Because, often they're singing louder, and then sometimes they're singing softer, and so certain parts are going to sound too loud and other parts too soft. So by using automation, we can control the level in each part of the song so that it sounds great throughout. Now, I know getting a good balance can be really tough. especially when you've heard the song 140 times, let me give you 4 tips to help you balance your mix. Number 1, listen at different volumes. Most of the time you want to be listening at a very low volume so that your ears don't get tired and you can make good judgments, but you also want to listen at different volumes because our ears hear differently at different levels. Number 2, listen from different positions. Every now and then I'll just get up out of my chair and I'll kind of just walk around the room and listen to the mix, and you get a different sense of what it sounds like. A classic trick used by even many of the best in the world is to walk outside the room, so whatever room you're mixing in, whether that's your bedroom or in a studio, but just walk outside the door and listen from the next room. And it's amazing what this does. It very quickly gives you a new perspective as to what is too loud and what's kind of jumping out too much and what is too soft and you can't really hear too well. The third thing you can do is to listen on different systems. It could be a little boombox, it could be your car, it could be an iPod, it could just be some headphones that you put on. Each different system, each different set of speakers is going to tell you something different about what's going on. And what you want to do is look for commonalities. So if the vocals sound too loud on the boombox and the headphones and the monitors, chances are the vocals are too loud. And the fourth thing you should do is to take regular breaks, even if that means just going and working on a different song. Something happens when you come back to a track with fresh ears that all of a sudden the balance just seems a lot more obvious, and some things are clearly too loud and other things clearly need to come up. The second most common issue that causes tracks to sound more like demos than professional commercial tracks comes down to arrangement. Demos often sound too busy and have parts that are incongruent with the feel and energy of the song, while pro productions have captivating arrangements that enhance the song and focus your attention on the most important elements. I know that sounds like a bit of a mouthful. It was the best description I could come up with these, but let's have a look at what this actually means. So what is the arrangement anyway? And how does that differ from the song? Well, the song is essentially just the melody and the lyrics. And the arrangement is everything else that makes up that song. This is the instruments used, the chords, the tempo chosen, the structure of the song, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've heard a song that has been produced by more than one artist, so you've heard different versions of it. So what they're doing is they're using the same melody and lyrics, but they're changing the arrangement to make their unique version of it. Now, arrangement is a big topic and we could talk for hours on this, but what I'm going to do is give you the 3 biggest arrangement issues that I come across. So if we go back to our example track, this one has all 3 of these issues. Number 1, it's too busy in places. So it's actually not too bad for the most part, it's actually pretty simple throughout, but there are some unnecessary tracks. I think the main thing that stands out to me is the fact that it's got 3 basses. All right, so it's got this one over here, and it's got this one over here, doing kind of a harmony, I guess, and then it's got this one over here. Having 3 bass tracks playing at the same time is just going to make the overall mix sound muddy and the low end unclear. You can have 3 different bass sounds, but preferably not all playing at the same time. So what we did is take the 3 different sounds and just divide them up onto 3 different tracks over here and make each one feature in a different section in which it sounded best over there. The second most common arrangement issue is incongruence. Now, incongruence simply means not compatible. And a common mistake is to choose sounds that aren't totally compatible with the song or the style. And this is a little bit more subjective. I'm not sure if you thought this yourself, but I found that the sound of the drums didn't always really match the intensity of the song that well. They just sounded a bit too aggressive in places. So this is what they sounded like in the original.
Maybe I can find someone new, but I don't need you.
She's singing quite quietly and she's not singing this intense I love rock and roll part, but the drums seem to indicate that she should be. So this is what it sounds like in the newer version.
Someone new, but I want only you.
They still sound punchy, but they're not nearly as big and aggressive sounding. And then the third thing is bad or generic sounds. Now, most of the sounds that you used were not bad at all, but one or two, could have used some improvement. The main thing that stood out to me was the piano. It doesn't really sound bad, it just kind of sounds sort of generic. It sounds very weak and thin, and doesn't really have much body to it. Take a listen to what this original one sounds like compared to the new one that we used. So this is the original one that she used. And this is the new version. Like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter how much EQ or effects or compression you had to use on that original one, it's never going to sound as good as this one over here. If you're curious, we used, I believe it was the Alicia's Keys piano plugin. It sounds fantastic. It's really got a great sound. It's got great body. It sounds realistic. And you just can't really get that sound without either recording a great sounding piano or using one of these really great sounding virtual instruments. So to sum up, the key lessons are to avoid an arrangement that's too busy, remove or mute any non-essential parts that are just cluttering up the mix or distracting from the main elements. Number 2 is make sure that the sounds you choose match the energy and style of the song. They sound congruent. Now this can be difficult to spot, but one good way to test this is just by going through kind of the different tracks and just muting certain parts and hear whether that actually improves the sound or not. If you mute the drums and suddenly the mix and the track just make more sense, then it might indicate that something in the sound of the drums is kind of throwing off the overall energy and sound of the song. And thirdly, as we said, a song can only really sound as good as its combined sounds. So, you just have to find the best sounds you can and try avoiding those kind of generic sounding MIDI instruments that don't really add to the sound. And in first place, the most common musical issue that causes that dreaded demo sound comes down to timing. Demo tracks sound loose, messy, and inconsistent, while pro tracks sound tight and have a solid rhythm and groove that drives the song. Surprisingly, this is the most common musical issue that I've heard again and again and again when listening to musicians' tracks from all over the world. The crazy part is that it's actually relatively easy to fix most timing issues. It just takes a bit of time, no pun intended. So this is the most common musical issue, and it's actually the easiest to fix out of these 5 that we looked at. Timing is what creates the rhythm and groove of music. Without it, we'd just have an endless drone. There's that old saying, music isn't about the notes, it's about the spaces in between the notes. Well, when those spaces are predictable and repetitive, it creates what we call rhythm. And it's interesting because our bodies naturally respond to these rhythms, and it's like we want to move to them, even if it's just nodding your head. Now, if the rhythm is suddenly slightly out of time, it kind of throws you off. It's jarring. It kind of takes you out of the feel of the song. So we generally want a consistent, solid rhythm to our songs. Now, just a little note here, a little variation can be good as long as it sounds musical. If every single part is perfectly on time, it can start to sound a little bit too mechanical, which is actually what you want for certain styles of music, but not for others. So I'm sure you picked up that there were timing issues with this track. There's a lot of little timing issues on a lot of different tracks, from the vocals, the piano, to the bass, to the drums. The most noticeable ones probably on the drums, like over here. So just little things like that throughout the whole song. So what can we do about this? Well, we can either re-record the part, or we can cut out a part that sounds in time from another section of the song and move it to this section. Or we can just go in there and cut out the piece and just kind of shift it in time. Now, if you've got MIDI tracks, it's even easier. Not only can you go in there and shift notes around, but you can use quantization to automatically move notes on time. So she's actually used quantization, but in some cases, it's actually pulled certain notes more out of time because it was closer to another part of the grid. Take a listen to this little run over here. So these two notes over here are too fast. They come in too soon. And if we actually change the quantization strength over here, just have a look at these two notes and look at what happens to them. As we make it stronger, it's actually pulling them more out of time than they were to start with. And that's because it's trying to pull them to whatever the closest line on the grid is. So quantization can be great, but you just need to make sure that it's pulling it more in time and not more out of time. Remember, computers don't have the best taste in music, at least not yet. They're just doing whatever the settings tell them to do. So here's some key lessons to help you put any timing issues behind you for good. Number one, use a click track while recording to make sure that you're staying on time. This doesn't work for all songs or styles of music, but in general, if you're doing a type of music that relies on a solid, consistent, tight sound, then you want all the instruments going into it to sound tight, and using a click track can help you to do that. Secondly, make sure that your rhythm section is tight and in time before recording any parts over it. If you've got messy sounding drums and you track bass and guitars and vocals and all that stuff over it, they're all going to sound messy and out of time. So make sure the rhythm section is in time first, fix any problems, and then record over it. If you're using MIDI, quantization can help to pull your tracks more in time, make them sound tighter. Just make sure that it's putting them more in time than out of time. Also, I don't recommend using 100% quantizing strength for most things because it can start to sound a little bit too mechanical then. And finally, if you're recording live instruments, most of the time it's so easy just to go in there and cut out a section that's slightly out of time and just shift it onto the grid. And those are the 5 most common musical mistakes. If you want your songs to sound professional and like your favorite commercial records, you need to start out by making sure that you don't have any of these issues in your tracks. And if you do, that you fix them. So if we had to give the song a rating out of 5 and we took away 1 point for each of these mistakes that are present, this song would, well, it doesn't do too well, does it? It had all 5 of these mistakes, so it gets 0 out of 5. It has tuning problems, it has musical mistakes, the balance is a bit off, the arrangement is too busy in places and certain sounds are just not congruent with it, and there's a lot of timing issues. So it gets a 0 out of 5, and that's why it sounds like it does. So if you want your tracks to get a 5 out of 5 and sound great musically, then you need to make sure that you get each one of these things right. Now, the new improved version that we reproduced, we made sure that there aren't any tuning issues. So we recorded enough takes to make sure that we could choose good sections, and I used auto-tune on there as well. We made sure that there were no mistakes. We just kept on doing takes until we got it right. We made sure that the balance is right by using a lot of the tips that I told you about earlier. We made sure that the arrangement works a lot better. So we got rid of some of the parts that were just too much. You know, those bass lines that were all playing at the same time. We separated those and made sure only one plays at a time. We chose sounds that were a little bit more compatible with the overall energy and feel of the song. And we chose some better sounds, it just sounded better. And finally, we made sure that there weren't any timing issues. So we fixed any timing issues in there and made sure that it just sounds nice and tight. So I think I can say reasonably objectively that it gets a 5 out of 5, at least for musical integrity. It sounds great musically. You know, most of these things are actually pretty simple, but it's doing all the little simple things right that really makes the difference in the end. So now it's time for you to rate one of your tracks. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you download the short little book below this video. You'll find all the things that we've just talked about broken down so you can refer back to it. And you also find a checklist at the end, which you can run through to make sure that you're not making any of these mistakes in your tracks. So you know how this works now. You subtract 1 point for each of these 5 types of mistakes. Now to get your music sounding the way you really want it to, you've got to aim for 5 out of 5. That's the goal. So if you're already at 5 out of 5, that's awesome. Great job. If not, well, you now know what you need to work on. But this is actually only half the story. We've just covered the musical mistakes here. So make sure to join me for part 2, where we'll be looking at the top 5 technical mistakes that make the difference between an amateur demo sound and that professional commercial sound that you want for your tracks.